The Empire had watched humanity for 3 centuries. They observed these strange creatures crawl out from their blue world and spread across the stars like insects finding new cracks in a wall. They found them amusing at first. Humans built their little colonies on distant moons and barren planets. They celebrated each small victory as if they had conquered the universe itself. They laughed at their pride. They laughed at their weakness. They laughed because they believed humans were nothing more than soft creatures pretending to be warriors. Admiral Al stood on the bridge of his flagship and smiled as he watched the bombing runs complete their mission. 17 human colonies burned across 3 star systems. Millions of humans died in fire and radiation. Their screams lasted only seconds before the void of space swallowed them forever. The attack had been perfect, swift, brutal, complete. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. They believed this would end the human problem forever. They thought Earth would surrender within days. They would beg for peace and accept their place as slaves to the Empire. But they did not understand humans. They had watched them for 3 centuries, yet they learned nothing. They saw only what existed on the surface. They never looked deeper. They never discovered what Earth had hidden in the darkness beneath its oceans and inside its hollow mountains. When the news reached Earth, the world fell silent. Every screen showed the same images: burning stations, shattered domes, bodies floating in the cold emptiness of space, children, families, friends, gone in moments of violence that nobody had expected. The United Earth Council gathered in their underground chamber. Presidents and generals and scientists sat together in shock. Some wept openly. Others stared at nothing with empty eyes. The weight of 17 million deaths pressed down on every soul. President stood at the head of the table. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. She looked at the faces around her and saw their grief transform slowly into something harder, something darker, something that had slept within humanity since the first human picked up a stone to defend their family. She spoke only 4 words that changed everything. Open the Prometheus vaults. The room went completely still. Several generals looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. The Prometheus vaults existed only in whispers. They were legends told to frighten new recruits. Nobody truly believed they were real, but they were. They had always been real. Earth had spent 200 years preparing for a moment everyone prayed would never come. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, massive doors that had remained sealed for generations began to open. The grinding of ancient metal echoed through chambers that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Lights flickered on in sequence, illuminating rows upon rows of ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. These were not the peaceful exploration vessels humans showed to the universe. These were weapons of absolute destruction. The Prometheus fleet consisted of 3,000 warships designed with only one purpose: total annihilation of any enemy foolish enough to threaten humanity's existence. General Cole descended into the vault for the first time in his life. He had known about Prometheus since his promotion to high command, but seeing it with his own eyes stole his breath away. The ships were black as the space between stars. Their hulls absorbed light itself. No sensors could detect them. No shields could stop their weapons. Each vessel carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half, and there were 3,000 of them waiting in perfect silence. But the ships were only the beginning. In another vault beneath the Himalayan mountains, something even more terrifying waited. Project Fury consisted of soldiers who were no longer entirely human. Volunteers had given their bodies and minds to science. They became living weapons wrapped in skin and bone. They could survive in vacuum. They could heal from wounds that would kill normal men within seconds. They felt no fear. They knew no hesitation. 100,000 Fury soldiers stood in cryogenic chambers, waiting for the call to wake. They continued their celebration for 3 weeks. They divided the conquered human territories among their noble houses. They made plans to capture Earth and harvest its population for slave labor. Admiral Al received medals and honors for his great victory. He posed for images with the ashes of human colonies floating behind him. He believed the war was already won. Then the darkness came for them. The first outpost to fall was a mining station on the edge of their territory. One moment all systems reported normal. The next moment silence, complete and absolute silence. No distress signals, no emergency beacons, just nothing. When rescue ships arrived, they found only debris. Every structure had been torn apart with surgical precision. Every on the station had simply vanished. Their bodies were never recovered. Admiral Al dismissed it as an accident, perhaps a reactor failure, perhaps a meteor strike. He ordered increased patrols and returned to his celebrations. But then more outposts went dark, 3 in 1 week, then 7, then 20. Each time the pattern repeated exactly. No warnings, no survivors, no bodies, just twisted metal drifting in the void where thriving stations had existed hours before. Fear began spreading through the fleet. Soldiers whispered about ghosts in the darkness. They spoke of ships that appeared from nowhere and disappeared before weapons could lock on. They told stories of shadows that moved through sealed corridors and dragged screaming into the black. The officers tried to maintain order, but even they felt the cold touch of dread creeping up their spines. The first direct engagement came at the shipyard above their colony world of Prime. Admiral Al commanded the defense himself. He had gathered 500 warships to protect the installation. Surely this force would be enough to defeat whatever had been attacking their outposts. The Prometheus fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel directly in the middle of the formation. One moment, the space was empty. The next moment, 300 black ships filled the void like a swarm of angry nightmares. The sensors screamed warnings too late. The human weapons fired before a single ship could raise its shields. Admiral Al watched in horror as his fleet disintegrated around him. Human weapons cut through armor like it was made of paper. Ships that had taken decades to build exploded in seconds. His flagship took 17 direct hits in the first volley. Alarms blared. Crew members screamed. Fire spread through every deck. He tried to give orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. He tried to organize a retreat, but his communications were jammed. He tried to understand how this was possible, but his mind could not process what his eyes were showing him. Humans were supposed to be weak. Humans were supposed to be easy prey. Humans were supposed to beg for mercy. Instead, humans had become death itself. The battle lasted exactly 11 minutes. Every ship was destroyed. The shipyard was reduced to molten slag. The colony below suffered no damage because the humans had no interest in killing civilians. They wanted the military to understand something important. They wanted every surviving officer and soldier to carry a message back to their leaders. Earth was no longer hiding. The Fury soldiers deployed next. They dropped onto military bases across space. They moved through defensive lines like smoke through fingers. Soldiers emptied their weapons at shadows that would not die. They watched their friends fall to enemies they could barely see. The Fury soldiers killed without hesitation and without error. Each target was eliminated with cold efficiency that turned the stomachs of even the most hardened veterans. General Cole led the assault on the capital world personally. His command ship descended through the atmosphere while ground defenses tried desperately to stop him. Every missile was intercepted. Every energy beam was deflected. His ship landed in the central plaza of their greatest city, and he walked down the ramp alone to meet the High Council. They had gathered to negotiate surrender. Their purple robes were stained with dust, and their faces showed the exhaustion of beings who had not slept in days. They had believed themselves masters of the galaxy. Now they understood how wrong they had been. General Cole stood before them in his simple uniform. No medals decorated his chest. No symbols of rank announced his importance. He was just a man delivering a message. He spoke calmly and clearly. His words carried the weight of 17 million dead humans. He told them that Earth had never wanted war. Humanity had reached for the stars with hands open in friendship. They had built their colonies to expand knowledge and create new homes for their children. They had believed the galaxy was vast enough for all species to exist in peace. But they had chosen violence. They had murdered innocents. They had laughed while families burned. They had celebrated while children suffocated in broken domes. They had awakened something within humanity that had slept for generations. Something ancient. Something terrible. Something that would never sleep again now that it had tasted blood. The general gave them a choice. They could accept complete disarmament. They could surrender their weapons and their warships. They could rebuild their society as a peaceful civilization under human observation. They would be allowed to keep their culture and their worlds. They would be treated with dignity and respect despite what they had done. Or they could continue fighting, and humanity would not stop until every warship was scrap metal floating in the void. Every military installation would be dust. Every soldier would be dead or captured. Earth would not negotiate again. Earth would not show mercy again. The next message would be delivered by weapons instead of words. The High Council surrendered within the hour. News of the defeat spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Other species who had considered humanity easy prey suddenly reconsidered their positions. Empires that had planned invasions quietly destroyed those plans and pretended they had never existed. Civilizations that had mocked human weakness now sent ambassadors with offers of friendship and trade. Earth rebuilt its colonies. The dead were honored with monuments on every human world. Their names were carved in stone and metal so that no generation would ever forget the price of peace. The Prometheus fleet returned to its vaults beneath the Pacific Ocean. The doors closed once again. The Fury soldiers returned to their cryogenic chambers to sleep until needed again. President addressed the United Earth Council for the final time before leaving office. She spoke about the nature of humanity. She explained that humans had always carried two souls within them. One soul reached for the stars with wonder and hope. It built, it created, it loved. The other soul slept in the darkness waiting for threats. It destroyed, it conquered. It showed no mercy to those who harmed the innocent. She hoped humanity would never need to wake the second soul again. She hoped the galaxy had learned its lesson. She hoped future generations would know only peace and exploration and the joy of discovery. But deep beneath the oceans and mountains of Earth, the weapons waited, the soldiers slept, the ships stood ready, because humanity had learned something important from the attack. Peace was precious, but it was never guaranteed. Kindness was beautiful, but it must be protected. Love was the greatest force in the universe, but sometimes love required fury. And Earth would always be ready to release that fury for those it loved.